Producer Jennifer Eckhart was raped by former Fox News anchor Ed Henry, who was fired 3 weeks ago. Former contributor Kathy Arue says Henry, along with Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, sexually harassed her. In the first 2 pages of the suit, Eckhart alleges that Henry, who is twice her age, asked her to be his sex slave and his little whore, and threatened punishment and retaliation if Ms. Eckhart did not comply with his sexual demands. Eckhart also claims she was violently raped while helpless and restrained in metal handcuffs as Mr. Henry performed sadistic acts on her without her consent. As for Arue, she says Henry sent her a slew of wildly inappropriate sexual images and messages throughout the first half of this year. Ed Henry's attorney, Catherine Foti, said the evidence in this case will demonstrate that Ms. Eckhart initiated and completely encouraged a consensual relationship. Fox News said in a statement that Kathy Arue's claims against Fox News are false, patently frivolous, and utterly devoid of any merit. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, New York.
Coming up next, an unforgettable moment in history. The words and message of John Lewis in 1963.
Make it unnecessary to march on Washington.
From the start of the pandemic, Sarah Poland was worried about her 30 employees. The founder and owner of Supergirl, a successful plant-based soup company in the Washington area, hired a private doctor to test her employees every week. For a while, it worked well, she says. Then,
the test results started taking longer and longer. And so it got to the point where I was getting results after the CDC recommended isolation period for asymptomatic carriers. So I'm spending all this money.
Additional protective gear, and when possible, the use of hand tools that don't generate aerosol spray.
People should feel absolutely safe returning to the dentist.
42% of dental offices say patient volumes are back to pre-COVID.
Cities across the country today, thousands of essential workers, including nurses, janitors, fast food employees, protesting racial inequality in the workplace. They're demanding better wages, health care, and paid sick leave. Many walking out for 8 minutes, 46 seconds in remembrance of George Floyd. And our interview tonight with Alex Trebek, the Jeopardy host with our TJ Holmes, revealing an experimental treatment
for him, Chris. Yeah, Mitch McConnell is the guy who gets it done in Washington, at least on the Republican side. And when it comes down to it, McConnell has made it clear he has been unusually loquacious for the Senate Majority Leader in talking about what this is going to be and what it isn't going to be. It's not going to be what the president wants, because the president, and probably rightly so, Bloomberg writes about this, other outlets are writing about it, he needs a huge infusion. He needs a nuclear blast of cash infusion into the economy to buoy people's spirits going into the election, or otherwise it gets turned out. So he feels a special pressure. McConnell's pressure points are different. He has members whose constituents don't want a $2 trillion forever cut to the Social Security tax, all of the sort of seemingly indecent fiscal proposals that are being thrown around here. That doesn't help McConnell's key members get reelected. So McConnell's talking about something that is short.
On the debut of the readout, which is minutes away, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we are thrilled to welcome our new neighbor, and I think you might be interested in sticking around to hear both her and some of those great guests. That's coming right up. After this break, we have the very special legal report on alleged police brutality and a case we're keeping our eye on. It's something I told you about that's important tonight. It's right after this break.
Get scaled back, whether it's an incentive to not fight to get back to work, whether it's the right thing. Apparently that hasn't been worked out yet.
Yeah, well, but I do think that the president understands that his election in November will reside almost entirely on the economy, and if
and bipartisan leaders who've convened the experts, some of those from whom we heard,
and putting you in control of the whole.
No payments until summer 20.
You can have whole clusters of people that you can tell that to, and that'll really increase confidence of people going back out in public and going back to work. It's crucial that they fix this.
Certainly is. Brian Todd reporting. Thank you, and we're going to have much more news just ahead.
In his life fighting for equality, but was the speech he gave at the 1963 March on Washington that gained him national attention. Tonight, a look back.
We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
It was the day that Americans remember for Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. But it was the youngest speaker, John Lewis, who is remembered for giving the most fiery address.
But we want to be free now.
At age 23, Lewis had already been arrested for leading sit-ins to integrate whites-only lunch counters. Organizers were worried about his references in a speech to revolution and violence.
My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution.
Lewis planned to rally the crowd to march through the South the way Sherman did and burn Jim Crow to the ground nonviolently. Instead, he said this.
But we will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today.
Hundreds of thousands listened to him that August day at the Lincoln Memorial. Almost 60 years later, and just a mile away, he would use his last public appearance to walk a D.C. street renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza.
Very impressive.
But while honoring George Floyd and others, his words from the 1960s still today resonate loudly for America.
We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient?
In that patience, he embraced what he called good trouble. We'll be right back.
This portion, their supplement plan.
Owner of Bathwana. We are excited.
In Troy, Alabama in 1940.
We're talking to John Lewis.
As a college student, he helped lead the fight against racial inequality in this country.
Somehow all of us must have the courage to get in the streets of Atlanta and keep walking in the streets, keep marching, keep sitting in, keep standing in, keep protesting, until the sagging walls of segregation come tumbling down. We can do it.
In 1963, at the age of 23, he helped plan the historic March on Washington alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Lewis was the youngest speaker.
My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution.
2 years later, he would lead 600 peaceful protesters in Selma. Beaten by state troopers, Lewis suffered a fractured skull.
I was the first one to catch the blow.
And over the decades, he would return to that bridge often, with so much work still left to do.
I'm not going to give up. No. I'm not going to give in.
No. It was 59 years ago this month, Lewis was released after using a so-called white restroom in Mississippi. He said, even though I was under arrest, I smiled because I was on the right side of history. You too must find a way to get in the way.
When you see something that is not right, something that is not fair, something that is not just, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. You cannot be quiet.
John Lewis, honored across this country. Thank you for watching on a Monday night. I'm David Muir. I hope to see you right back here tomorrow. From all of us here at ABC News, good night.
Thank you for making...
Only after public pressure that one of the officers was fired. Police chief also said that this was not the way to use deadly force. Now we're seeing more pressure. Protesters say they will live stream a new hunger strike to try to make sure that people stay focused on this story. This effort, they say, will be live streamed. I can also mention to you that we've invited those protesters on the beat tomorrow night, so we may hear from them.
First catch, first ever. After quite the battle, Ethan pulls the fish out of the water where his dad catches it with the net.
This pressure matters. As with so many police brutality investigations, we're seeing the scrutiny add to the evidence and information available. Some of this evidence, not very good for the officer's defense. I want to play something briefly right now, and we'll show you some of what's been happening in this case. Take a listen. audio, but I'll tell you the officers here have also been exposed for not trying to save Miss Taylor's life, as she lay dying for 5 extra minutes. No health care was provided. There are a lot of different parts of this case that we're going to stay on. The most important thing to keep in mind is the pressure and the scrutiny are raising the question in Kentucky whether anything will be done about a case that's not a mystery. We know who died, and we know who did it. Thank you, as always, for watching The Beat here on MSNBC. Stay with us right now for the debut of The Readout with Joy Reid.
Some of the most disturbing video is coming from Chicago. We got our first look at an incident from Friday. It's now being described as a coordinated ambush.
And we mourned an icon who spent his life fighting for civil and human rights. And we also witnessed the incoherent rambling of a president who has spent the last 4 years burning democratic norms to the ground. Good evening, I'm Joy Reid, and welcome to The Readout. John Lewis died after a life spent fighting and literally bleeding for the right of people who look like me to vote, and for the right of every American to live free of violence. And then there's Donald Trump, who this weekend openly teased that he might not accept the results of a Democratic election.
And she looks like
can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
The context for that, of course, is that Trump has spent the last 4 years aspiring to something other than democracy. He got elected with the help of a foreign adversary after asking Russia to help find dirt on his opponent. And then he got impeached for trying to do it again with Ukraine. Regarding former Vice President Joe Biden, he's tried to ban Muslims and refugees from this country, separated migrant children from their parents, stoked racism, division, and hatred while coddling neo-Nazis and the far right. And now he has sent federal troops into American cities to suppress protests for racial justice and police reform. He and his attorney general have meddled in the American justice system, commuting the prison sentence of his friend and of war criminals, while musing that his political enemies should rot in prison. And perhaps most shocking of all, he has failed spectacularly to lead as the country faces a raging pandemic with more than 130,000 dead. Instead, he denies basic science and continues to peddle the fantasy that it will all just go away on its own. And now even some Republicans who from day one made their bargain to follow Donald Trump to the gates of hell have concluded that they must work around him. An advisor to the Republican governor of Texas told the New York Times the president got bored with the pandemic, so now they're turning to the vice president instead. And all of that has played out with just 105 days until the next election. In a few moments, I'll talk with the woman who beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes in 2016, only to be denied the presidency by the Electoral College, Hillary Clinton. But my first guest is the man who will face Donald Trump in November, former Vice President Joe Biden. Former Vice President Biden, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations. It's the big day.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate it. No, we're very glad to have you on. I have so many questions for you. But the first one I have to ask you, you came into office with President Obama at the heels of a massive recession, on the heels of a very unpopular war that ripped this country apart and separated us from some of our allies. That was a tough entrance for the Barack Obama and Joe Biden administration. If you are elected, sir, you will face what I would argue is even a worse situation. We have right now paramilitary or federal troops on the streets of American cities. We have people crying out for police reform. And we have this pandemic that is catastrophic. So many people have died. You've talked a lot about it and about the tragedies. I want to let you listen to Donald Trump this weekend talking about that very pandemic and talking about other countries' response to it, and let you respond.
No country has ever done what we've done in terms of testing. We are the envy of the world. You look at other countries, they don't even do testing. I said it's going to disappear. I'll say it again. It's going to disappear. And I'll be right. I don't think so.
How do you respond to that?
I think he's right. No country has ever done what we've done. Walk away. There is no leadership here. He actually has zero. He surrendered. He talked about, you remember early on, this is going to go away in a few days. This is going to be gone tomorrow. You're going to wake up and be gone. He talked about how we were going to be in a position where we were going to be able to lead the world, etc. And he was going to be a wartime president fighting this virus. Well, he raised the white flag. He has no idea what to do. He's zero. It's only one thing he has in mind. How does he win re-election? And it doesn't matter how many people get COVID and or die from COVID, because he fears that if the economy is strapped as badly as it is today, that in fact he is going to be in trouble. That's what this is all about. I've never seen a president who has been so self-serving in the conduct of the office.
And, you know, one of the ways I think he believes he's going to get reelected is by going back to the playbook that he used before to try to go after Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which was passed, of course, during the administration with yourself and President Obama, and to go after immigrants again. I want to let you listen to what he thinks that the Supreme Court decisions recently have given him the license to do on those two issues.
We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks, a full and complete health care plan that the Supreme Court decision on DACA gave me the right to do. So we're going to sign an immigration plan, a health care plan, and various other plans.
What do you make of a president of the United States who's threatening again to take health care away from 20, 30 million people as his campaign strategy, and again going back to the idea of kicking out immigrants?
Look, this guy has no sense of empathy or concern for people. People are dying. Families are bereft. People are so worried about being able to see their grandmoms and grandpops for fear that they may get the COVID. I don't understand it. He has absolutely zero sense of empathy. Have you ever heard a word of him talking about how badly he feels about the losses, about the emptiness? Those folks who've lost somebody feel like they've been dragged into a dark, deep hole in the middle of their chest. They don't know what to do. They're scared to death. And what's the president do? He talks about taking away health insurance completely. And he says he's going to replace it with what? He's been talking about that forever. Zero. It is absolutely, I quite frankly don't get it. And I don't understand how he thinks it appeals to the American people. Overwhelming the American people want us to keep Obamacare and improve on it, not get rid of it in the middle of a pandemic with hundreds of thousands of people ill and dying, and he wants to take away health insurance? My Lord.
Well, you know, if you become president, if you're inaugurated on January 20th next year, it will be then your problem to deal with this pandemic, which, you know, we have to assume will still be raging because not enough is being done to try to beat it back. Walk us through what you would do differently, and assuming it actually by then will be worse.
Well, first of all, you may recall, Joy, I all the way back in January warned him this pandemic was coming. I talked about what we needed to do. I talked early on about the Defense Act that allows him to go and say to a company, manufacture the following things, and so on. So I mean, he has made every serious mistake, and he has absolutely bludgeoned people who disagree with him and the Republican governors and the like. So number one, I don't know how bad it's going to be. It's going to just be worse because he's doing nothing to deal with what he said was going to go away. It's going to get worse. I speak with docs every 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week for an hour and 15 minutes. They predict among them that there are going to be over 200,000 dead by the time we get to Election Day. They predict that this is just going to get worse and worse. So I'm going to be faced with a circumstance, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected president, where we're going to have to take significant action to do a number of things. One, you need more testing. You need to be able to test and trace. You need to be in a position where you're able to insist that everyone wear masks, everyone socially distanced, that businesses do not open if they cannot do that. We need to make sure that people are in a position where they can, in fact, maintain their businesses through the stimulus that's been out, that the Congress has put out. We need to keep people on their feet. We need to make sure health insurance, we have health insurance, as well as making sure no one has to pay for contracting COVID and or being treated for COVID. There's a whole range of things we have and must do and can do. In addition, I would suggest right now, and I've urged the president to do this, right now there may be a vaccine, God willing, after the first of the year. We should have a command officer now. We should be spending $25 billion to put together exactly how that will be distributed to over 300 million Americans. How will we do that? Where will it go? How will we get it done well? It needs planning. And without any planning between now and election day, now and the time we're sworn in, it's going to make it incredibly more difficult to get anything done. And that's why we're going to need a major public health corps provision, a whole range of things I won't bore you with now. But it's going to be very, very, very difficult.
You know, the current president, is planning to go back to doing daily briefings. And you'll recall that these were the briefings at which he suggested drinking bleaches of certain, types in order to cure COVID. Is this something that you have thought about, maybe countering that by doing briefings of your own?
Well, I have, but, and I've done a number of them, as you recall, Joy, when he was doing it. But there still is this overwhelming preoccupation with the president. And he's the president, so I get that part. But the idea that we cover everything he says, even when I never thought I'd see a time when senior and major reporters like you are watching something the president says, and as he speaks, and I don't mean just anybody who's progressive, I mean across the board, saying like Chris Wallace, that's not true, Mr. President. That's not what happened, Mr. President. But there seems to be such a fascination with covering everything he says. And by the way, the words of president matter, no matter how incompetent the president is. The words of a president can make the market rise or fall. They can take us to war. They can bring peace. They can do a lot. And so as President of the United States, the first thing I'm going to do is stand up and talk sense and be honest with the American people, level with them, tell them exactly what I know and what's going to happen, and take responsibility for what's happening. But it's going to take an awful lot, Joy, and I don't know what I'm going to be left with, assuming I'm elected president. And
in order to do all of that, you first have to get elected, and one of the barriers to that is foreign interference. And you've talked about the fact that you issued a statement saying that you are aware that foreign interference is already happening, and you're saying...
And said this was improving until the federal... This has been 53 days that they've done this. That's 7.5 weeks of rioting, looting, violence, attacks on police officers, destruction of property, and they don't want any help. They just want to let this continue to happen to their constituents, to their business owners in their city. I mean, this is scary to me. And the idea that this is somehow President Trump's fault? I mean, we went back and checked. Harris, you know the last time there was a Republican mayor elected in Portland? 1956. I mean, that was long before you were born, and it was even before I was born. So this every member of the city council in Portland, Democrat, no Republican. So how is this a Republican problem? This is scary what's going on. What Democrat mayors, Democrat governors are allowing to happen to their cities, to their constituents, is frightening. And I know that these cops, just like the police chief in Chicago said, the officers certainly like federal help there to have them deal with the situation that they've encountered now for 53 days in the city of Portland.
You know, I am curious because it would seem that all of this started as a conversation that the nation was ready to have about police reform. And we've gone far afield from that. I interviewed Senator Scott, Tim Scott, on my special last night on all of this. And, you know, the thing that confuses me now as we get back to work and it's Monday, a fresh new week, is that Democrats have said that they really want to put off that police reform. And they want to put off a deeper conversation about, you know, potentially making things different and better. Yeah. How do you as a Republican on the Hill go forward with that? That's a lot of pressure on everybody. If you have to sit with this scene replicating over and over, we dealt with one autonomous zone, then we had several.
No, it's sad, and Tim Scott, Senator Scott's done tremendous work, and he truly wanted to get to a consensus, get to good legislation that helped protect law enforcement, but also dealt with the situation, the tragedy that took place in Minneapolis, and he had a good bill. We offered, during the markup on the House side in the Judiciary Committee, we offered on the Republican side 12 thoughtful, good amendments. They didn't take a single one of them because this was about politics for the Democrats. That's the scary thing, so I wish we could.
Wanted to follow in his parents' footsteps.
Salas, a trailblazer, New Jersey's first Latina U.S. District Court judge, nominated in 2010 by then-President Barack Obama.
This family was a tight family. Just close, loving, doting parents.
Presiding over the fraud trial of Real Housewives star Teresa Giudice and her husband Joe, and a lawsuit brought against Deutsche Bank for failing to monitor high-risk clients, including convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Her husband, a well-known figure in their town of North Brunswick, says Mayor Mac Womack.
Did Mark have enemies?
Mark's a criminal defense attorney, and before that, he was a prosecutor at the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. And I don't think you can be a prosecutor and do your job and at least not have some people who don't like you.
The shocking crime taking another bizarre turn today, more than 60 miles from here in rural New York. There, law enforcement officials say they found the body of the suspect, attorney Roy Den Hollander, dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot. Hollander, a New York lawyer well known for his anti-feminist agenda, on MSNBC in 2010, discussing his lawsuit challenging the legality of ladies' nights in bars.
They get in for free. We, however, had to pay $20.
Calling Salas in his book a lazy and incompetent Latina judge appointed by Obama. He is also a suspect in the shooting of a California lawyer July 11th. The judge's family now in mourning, her son dead, and her husband hospitalized, recovering from gunshot wounds. Ann Thompson, NBC News, North Brunswick, New Jersey.
Now to our NBC News exclusive. As New York City entered a new phase of reopening today, Governor Andrew Cuomo headed south on a mission, he says, to prevent the virus from returning to the Northeast. He spoke one-on-one with NBC's Gabe Gutierrez.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is still on the move, even though most of his state is no longer at a standstill.
Why head down to Georgia today?
Georgia has a road problem. We rode with the governor on a chartered flight down to Savannah, Georgia, among the many states now battling a dramatic surge.
And it's so unnecessary in a way, right? Because we knew what we needed to do.
Today, Cuomo met with Savannah's Democratic mayor, who's been sharply critical of Georgia's Republican governor, who's refused to mandate masks.
Healthcare professionals say this can save lives. Healthcare researchers say if we had a national mask policy, we would save 40,000 lives.
Back in April, New York State saw more than 800 COVID deaths a day. Today, that number is down to 8. Months ago, thousands of volunteers rushed to New York to help fight the virus. Now, the state has sent PPE, medication, test kits, and contact tracers to new hotspots in Georgia, Florida, and Texas. Cuomo dismisses the Trump administration's insistence that more cases are simply due to more testing.
This president has refused to accept reality. He is still in denial about the COVID virus.
Anti-feminist and had derided the judge. In the presidential campaign, Democrat Joe Biden picked up endorsements from top Muslim American officials. They include Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. The former vice president addressed an online Muslim summit and vowed to get rid of the ban on travelers from mainly Muslim countries.
Donald Trump has fanned the flames of hate in this country across the board through his words, his policies, his appointments, his deeds. If I have the honor of being president, I will end the Muslim ban on day one.
Meanwhile, President Trump took part in a roundtable with supporters this evening at his hotel in Washington. But in his interview that aired Sunday on Fox News, he would not say if he will accept November's election results if he loses.
You don't know until you see. It depends. I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
We'll take a closer look at the presidential race later in the program. The United Arab Emirates launched
at Oxford. Professor, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time. Lay out for us the promising signs that you're seeing with your vaccine.
What we've reported today in The Lancet is a new data set on the phase 1 trial of our vaccine, meaning just over 1,000 people. And firstly, the safety data looks very reassuring in all of those individuals. no serious adverse events, nothing of significant concern. And then when we look at the immune responses, they are present in everybody. We see good neutralizing antibodies. These are the ones that we are looking for that should inhibit the infection of the virus into cells. And in addition, we see the other arm of the immune system, the cellular arm, usually called T cells, which are there in large numbers as well, even after a single dose of the vaccine. So really results at the high end of our expectations. So we are now moving forward. We vaccinated around about 10,000 people in trials so far, and we are following those for efficacy to see if the vaccine really works.
So now, right, so now you charge into phase 3. You've got trials in the UK, Brazil, and South Africa that are underway. Can you say how much closer you are now to a final vaccine?
Well, I should add that the largest trial should start soon, and that is actually in the US. Right. So we're hoping that will be underway in the next 2 or 3 weeks. How close we are depends, of course, on the incidence of infection in the trial population. That's relatively low in the UK, but high in South Africa and high in Brazil, and we anticipate that in some of the states that we work in the US, the infection rates will be high as well. So it's very difficult to call. Could be September, could be October. Nobody really knows, and we're blinded to the data as it comes in.
That's right.
But we're still hoping for this year. Absolutely.
Still hoping for this year. The big unknown is how strong of the immunity is and how long it lasts. When do you think you will have an answer to that with your vaccine?
Yeah, of those two questions, whether the immune response is strong enough to protect people with high efficacy is really the key question. In terms of how long it will last, we're less concerned about that. We've used this vaccine type before. Immunity is durable, certainly for a year, probably for longer than that. So that's much less of a risk. The real question that nobody can answer is, are the immune responses that we and some other groups are seeing actually strong enough, potent enough to stop this infection happening and to protect people? Based on what we've seen in animal data, the answer is probably yes, but humans could be different.
The record-breaking pace at which you and other developers are working is so comforting to so many, as a vaccine is really the only way out of this global crisis. But what do you say, Professor, to people who are concerned that it's all moving too fast, so much faster than other vaccine development has gone in the past, that speed could compromise safety? What do you say to that?
Well, I think we can reassure those people along these lines. We're not actually doing anything different to what we would traditionally do in vaccine development. Yes, we're moving faster, but all the checks and balances in the system are being observed to a stringent regulatory review. We have data safety monitoring committees. Of course, everything goes through an ethical committee. And the quality of the vaccine that we're using is what we would normally use in any development program. And in fact, we're learning a lot more about scaling up this vaccine now that we have to make hundreds of millions of doses. So there aren't any shortcuts. We're observing all the safety requirements, but we're doing that with less gap in between all of the stages. So we're getting very rapid response from the regulators, decisions often the same day, an interactive process. And this is the way that all vaccines could be developed if there were sufficient resource and determination in the system to develop other vaccines at the same speed.
Yeah, setting a good precedent, I would argue, for vaccines going forward. But let's see what happens here first. Professor, thank you very much for your time and your work. I look forward to hearing how the next phase goes. Out front for us next, Florida reporting more than 10,000 cases of coronavirus for the 6th day in a row.
Is now being taken away. More protests expected tonight, Lester.
All right, Aaron, thank you. When we come back, a new honor today as Americans mourn a towering loss.
Let's instead stop.
Is perfect for hands-free viewing in the home.
Through it as well in the administration, but you were the victim of it. What would you advise the Biden campaign to do?
Well, I'm glad that Vice President Biden and his campaign are speaking out about what we know is going on and what they are learning from intelligence briefings. It's very clear that Russia succeeded. They believe that they were able to influence the minds and even the votes of Americans. So why would they stop? They really want to pursue their agenda of dividing us, undermining trust within our country, helping to elect someone who is favorable to their agenda. And if you're China, which is an easy jump to make, and you're looking at the chaos that the Trump administration has created in the world, while you're trying to assert yourself more, while you're cracking down internally on dissent, on the Uyghurs, setting up a surveillance nation, trying to dominate the South China Sea, engaged in border skirmishes with India, and all this other activity that we're watching with some concern coming out of China. Well, Donald Trump is your biggest ally. You know, his being president with his incoherent, inconsistent foreign policy has given you a tremendous opportunity. So I am glad that Vice President Biden, with all of his experience in foreign affairs from the Senate, from being vice president, is trying to warn the American people that what happened in 2016 is sadly underway again.
Yeah, to say nothing of putting bounties on American troops.
It's unbelievable, Joy.
Yeah.
I mean, he is still yet to say anything as the President of the United States about bounties on American troops. It's just unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. A lot of it is. You know, I showed the Der Spiegel cover to the former vice president, but, you know, I'll ask you this question. Having been Secretary of State, you know, the thing that is new for me about the way the world is looking at us, you know, the rest of the world has been angry with us during the Iraq War, has felt bullied by the United States on issues regarding their own democracies, etc. But this is new. Pity. We are seeing headlines around the world that the United States is now an object of pity. We've been kicked out of certain supply chains. Our farmers are now locked out of certain markets because of tariffs. How would you advise fixing that? Or can it be fixed? Do you think that this is a problem that will end up, you know, dominating a lot of the foreign policy of the Biden administration, just trying to repair the relationships and our esteem in the world?
It can be repaired if we make a change in the White House starting next January. It won't be easy because we're going to have to rebuild our alliances with our friends around the world who have, as you just pointed out, been looking at us with confusion, with pity, with deep concern about what this means to the future of democracy and our relationships. We're going to have to be very clear with adversaries like Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, that we are back in the business of diplomacy, tough-minded diplomacy to try to deal with the vacuums that have been created by this administration. It will take a lot of time and effort and intensive work, Joy, but it can be done. I dare not think about what we would be left with if for some reason Trump were to be reelected, because then I think the damage to our institutions, to the rule of law, to America's unity, and to our role in the world would be much, much harder to repair.
You know, and having run against Donald Trump, but even before that, I mean, you know, Donald Trump has been sort of floating around, you know, in you know, elite circles and sort of touching them here and there. So you know Donald Trump. Are you concerned that Donald Trump will not accept the results of the election in November if he loses?
Well, he seemed to signal that with his Chris Wallace interview, didn't he? When he said he would have to wait. We have to be concerned, and I think it's something that not just the Biden campaign, but everyone in any position of responsibility on both sides of the political divide have to begin preparing for. And here's what I think that means. We need to shore up our electoral security. We need to make it possible for people to vote by mail. I'm involved in helping to support lawsuits against states that are trying to minimize or make that difficult because that's what the Trump administration wants. We have to make sure there are enough poll workers so that people can vote in person with early voting and enough places when they show up on Election Day. We know what needs to be done, and I think it's fair to say, Joy, that the other side does too, because clearly the strategy for re-election that Donald Trump is following is to try to make it as difficult as possible for people to vote, to have those votes counted, to sow even further distrust in our electoral system, to be in a position, if he does get repudiated on Election Day, to say, well, I'm not sure it was fair, and to try to drag the process out. So I take his veiled threat, I take it very seriously, and I hope that fair-minded, conscientious officials at all levels of government will do everything they can to make our elections work and to make sure that people have a chance to vote and have those votes counted.
All right. Well, Secretary Clinton is going to stay with us for just a moment.
The case, and after that election in 2016, it was the Democrats who went on an attack against this president like we've never seen before, perpetrating an entire Russia hoax. They were the ones who continue to say to this day that it was Hillary Clinton who won the election. They're still saying Stacey Abrams is the duly elected governor of Georgia. They're the ones that have a problem standing up for the results of an election. But we're not going to take a lesson from them on that, and we're sure not going to say right now that whatever happens, we're just going to say that's the way it is, because we know now that Democrats have a history of cheating in elections, and we're not going to let them cheat on this one. If this election is free and this election is fair, Donald Trump will get 4 more years in the White House.
Well, and then there's one thing that no one can guess, and that is how COVID-19 will play a role in how people choose to vote. We'll cover it all. Hogan Gidley, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Harris. I appreciate it.
Today in Florida, 10,000 new coronavirus cases, a rising death toll, and now some are suggesting reinstating the lockdown. It might be the only way out of it.
Patrizia Rinaldi speaks on behalf of hoteliers in Rimini, but she's worried about Italian tourism as a whole.
To the east. Now, there is a severe thunderstorm watch. Part of that left for southwest and south central South Dakota until 7 o'clock tonight. And again, those storms in northeastern South Dakota, although they look kind of scary, it looks like they will continue to decrease in intensity. We'll have the complete forecast for you coming up just a bit later on, Kelsey. All right, thanks, Phil. Okay. Developing at this hour, one person is dead following a 2-vehicle crash in southeastern Sioux Falls. The South Dakota Highway Patrol confirming that one person died in the crash. Other details are limited at this time. Stay with Dakota News Now for further updates. A Dakota News Now follow-up. Authorities have identified a man following a deadly crash in Hamlin County. The Department of Public Safety says Scott Thompson was driving a UTV north on 465th Avenue near Esteline. A semi-truck entered the southbound lane to pass the UTV when Thompson suddenly moved into the same...
That anywhere you are, when you're interfacing with the public as of July 1st, you must wear facial covering. We know that is something that helps to prevent the spread of this disease. We must ensure that we're doing what is necessary to protect all of us.
Let me ask you, because one key indicator to watch is the test positivity rate. In Broward, that just jumped back up yesterday. Back up to 17.6%. That is the highest as we were looking at it since July 8th. Mayor, what is driving this?
Well, part of what I think we believe is happening is the many parties that are happening in single-family houses. And as such, we imposed a curfew that prevents folks from being out after 11 o'clock. We know that many of these parties are gatherings with large number of people with no social distancing, no facial coverings. In fact, Broward Sheriff's Office this weekend shut down 5 parties in one 3 square mile area. So we know that's a big problem that we're having. Many of our restaurants are acting as clubs and bars, even though we did not allow them to open clubs and bars. And we're shutting those down at 10 o'clock in the evening also, so that we don't have that partying going on late into the night.
Now, I want to play you something. You've put a curfew.
53.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I need to get him off. Also, for 3 years, we've listened to gotcha. Instead of really doing journalism, etc., it's been going after Trump. In my opinion, I just asked all of the news people, has he ever done anything right? I mean, to me, the man's done great under the pressure he's been under as far as getting attacked every single day. Kayleigh McEnany, I think, is the greatest hire he's ever had, because she stands up to people who are sharks and just want to destroy the man every second that he wakes up. Yet, the Bidens get off. They don't get asked any questions. They don't. I watch what's going on. Every time Trump wakes up, I got to go get him and destroy him. But yet, the Democratic Party gets zero coverage for anything, and we got a serious election coming up.
So, yeah, I mean, what's your name again?
My name's Rick.
So, Rick, I want to first of all tell you that in my book, I do address one of the points you made, which is the relentlessly negative tone of so much of the media coverage of Donald Trump since the day he walked into that White House, and I do agree that that the overall tone of the coverage has been one of every day, oh my God, look at what he just did, look at this outrage, that outrage. Now, a lot of that he's provided a lot of material to fuel that coverage. But what I do believe that it has obscured the fact that there have been real accomplishments of this administration that I talk about in my book. So I acknowledge that point, but I think that it's incorrect to say that the Bidens don't get looked at, they don't get talked about. I actually asked the very first question that was asked about Hunter Biden. I think, imagine, before most people had any idea who Hunter Biden was or what Burisma or any of that is, I asked about that in the White House at a briefing of Jay Carney right after he was named to the board of Burisma. And I said, isn't this at the very least a conflict of interest, or an appearance of a conflict of interest, to have the vice president's son getting paid by this Ukrainian energy company at the time when not only does the vice president deal, of course, with all any foreign policy questions, but he was the point person on Ukraine. So I do think that was a legitimate issue. That's why I asked about it all those years ago. But so look, I think you do have a point on a lot of the coverage is so thoroughly and totally negative. You can't distinguish between what a real story is and what a kind of relatively trivial thing is. But look, good reporters ask tough questions and do investigative reporting on political figures, certainly candidates for president, regardless of what party.
As you well know,
and then that led to a contagion in the general population, and that's what we see today.
How frustrating is it to know that the good, hard work of your citizens there was not maybe completely unraveled, but certainly damaged in terms of what you have to do next? So you've got the ICUs full. What will you do if hospitals start to reach capacity? Like, you're not going yet in that good direction again, so what are you going to do?
Well, we've seen a slowdown on the speed up, let's put it that way. It's not, we're not seeing the hospitalizations rising at the same rate. We're seeing kind of tapering down. We have instituted a curfew a couple of weeks ago.
Much to you.
Well, his friendship, his example, his extraordinary leadership and service, Joy. I hope that Americans, as we mourn his passing, also are committed to following through with his legacy. And that, for me, would mean getting the Voting Rights Act passed. It's been passed in the House. It should be passed in the Senate. It was something that he worked on his entire life. He paid a huge price in being beaten and jailed because he believed that every American should have the right to vote and have that vote counted. I would love to see the Senate take up the Voting Rights Act from the House and rename it the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and as a fitting tribute to him, but as a continuation of his mission, his service, his work, his moral leadership. And I loved him. I just, loved him and miss him personally so very much. And I want to see the example he set really held up for years and generations to come.
Secretary Hillary Clinton, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Joy, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, the governor of Georgia, is trying to restrain her from speaking to the press. Well, she'll be here speaking with us at the center of the fight over deployment of federal agents into America's cities. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Both will join me next as the readout continues.
Statewide mask mandate, would that make it easier? We'll keep this video up. I'm just curious to get your thought on that. Do you need help from the state from the top down?
No, not really. I think we in our tri-county area we have the mask order. It's Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach has and also even Monroe has a mask order. The governor has allowed us a certain amount of autonomy here. It's different here in Southeast Florida than it is in other parts of the state. And so look, it's even different inside Miami-Dade County than it is, in other parts of Dade County, right? And so we have rural areas, we have urban areas, and so the governor has been nothing but supportive of the efforts that we've had down here. He's sent additional personnel to our hospitals. He sent additional resources to Miami-Dade County. So I can't be anything but appreciative of the work that Governor DeSantis has done here for Miami-Dade.
Map to allow us a way out. I just want to reiterate what John just said. We have a very short window to act now to avert a real catastrophe this fall. And that catastrophe can only be averted with a major new investment in testing and tracing, the development of protocols so people without symptoms are getting regular screening tests. The good news is there's some new technologies, particularly the low-cost, less sensitive, but more frequent and rapid antigen tests that could change the reality in America. But we need to embrace that new opportunity now and act on it.
John Barry, we should note that as cases did increase, there were some mitigation steps put into place, not consistently across the entire country, but as Dr. Fauci recently pointed out, we never went into a full lockdown across the country. Do you think that could still be ahead?
Well, certainly, I think in hot spots, county by county, that may very well probably is necessary. Politically, nationally, that would be difficult. Obviously, we never got the baseline down where it needed to be. And right now, it is, I think, out of control in several states. And you're not going to get control of it, even if you get widespread compliance with social distancing, masks, hand washing, staying home when sick, and so forth. That is not going to do more than blunt the explosive growth. It will not, in a short time frame at any rate, get things down where they need to be. You need to be much more aggressive than that so that you will have few enough cases that the testing and tracing is possible.
Dr. Shah, it's hard for many people to remember what life was even like 6 months ago. It has changed so dramatically in so many different ways, and we can mark the beginning of the pandemic with that first confirmed case on January 20th. How do we mark the end?
Well, as we've seen before, the only way you mark the end is when you see the curve bent so low that it's really no longer an imminent and immediate threat to everyone around us. And we've done this before. Frankly, some states have succeeded in this first wave of getting cases down. We've seen other countries, as John mentioned, succeed in getting over the hump. We ourselves, America, led the effort in West Africa to fight back against the Ebola crisis and won. So we know how to do this, but it starts with having a data-driven, evidence-based approach, and that requires testing, that requires tracing, and that requires behavior change. And it has to be top-down and organized. Right now, the federal government has an opportunity. everyone should have that kind of access to testing so they can go do their essential work. And the government could make that possible by putting resources into advanced purchase contracts or using the Defense Production Act to make tens of millions of additional test kits available, especially these new, low-cost, rapid tests that get you a result in 15, 20 minutes. So it's that sort of mindset of we're all in it together, we'll work together left and right, public and private. That's what it's going to take to win this fight.
It's a phrase we've heard often over the last 6 months. We're all in it together. That is
still there in prominence, so that's going to be helpful.
Learning so much, but still so far to go. It's great. Thank you, Sanjay. Out front for us next, California breaking records.
My cabana.
That's it.
Not come out without identity, without who they are, what jurisdiction it is.
Gets me is that business of.
I really love
our businesses, our advisory voluntary recommendations. This governor is suing me personally for making voluntary recommendations to people on phase guidelines. And these guidelines are based on where we are with COVID. It's based on metrics. It's based on science. It's based on data. And this continuation of claiming that we are playing politics really is laughable in this state. There were many other cities, including Savannah, including Athens, Georgia, his hometown, that instituted mask policies. He did not sue them. And I don't know if it's because those cities were led by men. I don't know if it's because of my support of Joe Biden. I don't know if it's because of the demographic makeup of Atlanta, but he has taken personal exception with our city and with me personally. And it's inexplicable given where we are in our state with COVID-19.
And what do you make of this idea that he is trying to enjoin you from speaking?
Well, my husband got a very good laugh about that. He said he should have spoken with him about that first. I think he obviously wants to silence my voice. And what is most striking, as I looked at the numbers today, Atlanta has a population of about 500,000. We have about 10 million, a little over 10 million people in this state. We have 49% of the COVID cases in the city of Atlanta. So in a time when we are in the midst of a pandemic, we need as many voices as we can have as possible, sounding the alarm, encouraging people to wear masks and to take all precautions and to follow the science and the data. And it is completely unreasonable, the course that this governor has put us on. We were one of the first states to reopen. He opened up a satellite hospital at our World Congress Center for $20+ million to do that. He took it back down. He now has to open it back up. ICU capacity in Atlanta, I think we have roughly about 13% left in capacity in Atlanta, and yet he wants to silence me.
Yeah. Let me bring Mayor Lightfoot in, because there's a different sort of challenge that you're facing with the federal government. You sent a letter, I have this letter here, that you sent to the president, to Donald Trump, regarding this decision to try to deploy federal troops like the ones that we've seen in Portland into the city of Chicago. I want to let you listen to what Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf said about your objections to sending in those troops.
And so I don't need invitations by the state mayors or state governors to do our job. We're going to do that whether they like us there or not.
To a lot of people, that sounds like tyranny, that he's going to send armed, they're not troops, they're not even military, they're like Customs and Border Protection and you know, immigration officials that they're sending in unmarked gear. What is your response?
Well, first of all, as a former federal prosecutor, I know that if resources are brought in to augment existing federal infrastructure under the control and direction of a local U.S. attorney, there might be a value add. But look at what's happened in Portland. What we have there is no advance notice to the local authorities, no notice to the local U.S. attorney's office, and having these armed camouflage individuals with no insignia on, no nameplates, grabbing people off the street, that's unconstitutional. So our democracy is at stake. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let anybody, even if their name is Mr. President, bring those kind of troops to our city and try to take off our residents. That's not going to happen in Chicago. And if they try it, I'm going to use every tool at my disposal to stop them. We still have a constitution. We still have laws on the book, and I'm going to use those to deploy against them. We're not going to have tyranny in the city of Chicago. It's just not going to happen.
The things that the federal government, that the Trump administration wants to do, appear to be have the support of the police department, or at least the police union, in your city. We've seen incidents sorry?
Not our police department. We've got an unhinged leader of the Fraternal Order of Police who is craven and trying to generate attention. Now, he has asked for that, but reasonable local police officials, including our superintendent, know that this is a dangerous road for us to go down. We're not going to have people that don't know our streets, don't know our neighborhoods, and then are engaging in clearly unconstitutional conduct, operating at will in our city. That is chaos. That is lawlessness, and we are absolutely not having it.
Are you planning on filing a lawsuit?
If we need to, we will, and we will be prepared.
And Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, would you consider filing a counter lawsuit against the one filed against you?
Oh, absolutely. And like Mayor Lightfoot, we're going to fight with everything that we have. Donald Trump and his minions are the architects of chaos in this country right now, and I'm so glad to call Lori a friend. We talk as mayors quite often about the challenges that we are facing, and so we're on the front lines of this, not alone, but this will be a coordinated response from us across this country.
Yeah. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, thank you both very much.
The Constitution and Bill of Rights and rule of law versus anarchy and violence, we win. But if it's just a personality contest, that's what the Democrats want it to be, because they think they win that election.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you very much for your time tonight. Always good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Up next, the NFL training camp set to start next week. Are the players going to show up? I caught a tweet by Patrick Mahomes. He's waiting for the COVID-19 plan. Football stars have launched a Twitter blitz to demand stricter coronavirus safety measures. Former NFL player Burgess Owens is with me. We love to go back and forth. Stay close.
Looking at how much money and where to spend money in COVID relief. Does it go to individuals? Is it going to go to cities and states? What do you see right now?
Well, there's a major fight brewing, and the answer is probably going to be all of the above. But the question is sort of how much money goes to what thing, how much money will go to schools to help them reopen safely. President Trump talks a lot about wanting the schools to reopen. There's something that comes after that for most parents, which is safely. And Mitch McConnell has said, and we'll find out more details soon, but has said that he thinks that the schools do need to get money in this. That one of the big fights will be about the unemployment insurance, the sort of extra insurance, extra unemployment that people have been getting because of the pandemic.
And Amy, quickly, how much does all this matter politically, that they get this done and they get the money out there?
Well, very important. If schools are the big issue here, remember, schools start opening in many states in August. So this money has to start getting out the door very quickly. They can't wait until September and October. The other thing is, if you look at some of the ads run by incumbent Republicans who are in danger this year, like Susan Collins, they're touting the amount of money they've brought back to their states. They'd love to be able to talk about that in their re-election campaign ads than having to talk about Donald Trump, especially in some of these really competitive blue and purple states.
So interesting. Election's only 3.5 months away. I looked at the calendar. Today, we know it's coming, November 3rd. Amy Walter, Tamara Keith, thank you both.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And And that's the news hour for tonight. But before we go, a word about someone the country lost this weekend. I first interviewed John Lewis in Atlanta in 1971 when he was director of the Voter Education Project. I was a cub reporter for a local TV station. He was in his early 30s, but already a hero of the civil rights movement. I remember being struck by the contrast between his burning determination to make a difference and that polite, soft-spoken demeanor. I was lucky to be able to interview him many more times over the years, including in 2002, when John Lewis publicly forgave then Senate Majority Leader, Republican Trent Lott of Mississippi. This after Lott had praised South Carolina segregationist Strom Thurmond. Congressman Lewis told me it's very much in keeping with the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence to forgive people. He defined what it meant to be courageous and was truly one of the greatest people I've ever known. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here tomorrow evening. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, thank you. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour.
Tommy supports my back and my life. Go to Tommy Copper.
With those monuments and flags being stripped away to make space for a new and more inclusive vision of America, and where Americans, old and young, black and white, are marching, John Lewis style, for justice. The danger comes from the creep of autocracy in America. In another era, the notion of federal troops headed to American cities triggered relief in the hearts of Americans who are struggling to exercise their right to vote, or to go to school, or to go to college. But today it invokes something very different. Violence, horror, and the fear that our democracy is slipping. Opportunity versus danger, the central conflict of our time. That's what we'll be covering on The Readout night after night. And tonight, to close out my first show, I'm so happy to be joined by my friend and colleague, Lawrence O'Donnell, host of The Last Word. Lawrence, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you being here. Give me your summation of, where we stand right now. Do you feel more opportunity or more chaos ahead?
Well, look, looking at the polls that show Joe Biden with as much as a 15-point lead, the low end of it is the 10-point lead in the polls, that says to us that Trumpism ends on election night. That says to us that we are going to be in a new world next year if those poll numbers hold. And so the poll numbers are the reason for optimism tonight. We're going to have to get through an awful lot of grim days and nights between now and then, as we're seeing in Portland tonight.
Yeah. One of the things that, former Vice President Biden said is he sort of shook his finger, right, in the...
Young men have a concern, which is legitimate. I think the problem is you have a corporate activist, unfortunately, spending more time over the last few months trying to figure out how to give black people a separate anthem and actually dividing the American people and just getting down to what we need to get done. It's a shame that you have an organization like the Disney.
Joe Biden is. Yeah. And I was also struck, Joy, by how plainly he spoke about Donald Trump by saying Donald Trump doesn't care, and saying it repeatedly, saying Donald Trump doesn't care about people dying from this. And the idea that you could say that about a president of the United States, and a majority of the audience would nod in agreement that that's correct, the president doesn't care about this, is a very, very powerful statement by Joe Biden. And he's the last guy to say that kind of thing wildly. It's just conventional wisdom now that Donald Trump doesn't care.
And, Secretary...
now. Maybe skip preseason?
Well, this is the thing. It's not a surprise that fall's going to come and that football season would eventually show up again. And I'll tell you right, these young men, this is their season. This is their zone. They want to play. They want to get paid. At the same time, they understand that they have families. They want to make sure that they're safe. These are conversations should have been had a long time ago. So we're at this point where they have a plan, a program set up, and everybody can feel comfortable to go out there and play the game. But again, when you're lacking leadership, when you have people in this case, your commissioner, who's focused on more things than the players and the fans, you get this kind of results of just being able to be looked at as very hapless. And it's unfortunate for everybody that he's not taking the control that he should have had by this time.
All right, you sort of passed on that you think
it is a very, very tragic story, but it appears, according to investigators, that he had some kind of a grudge against this judge. We found some of his writings online, Kate, including where he's making...
Last question before I let you go. You know, the question of a black woman VP it's rolling around my circles a lot. What did you make of Joe Biden's answer on that?
Man, you brought him. I mean, you really closed in on that, Joy. You didn't give him any room, and he made it very clear. There's at least 4 black women who are very serious candidates for vice president right now, and you know that the maximum list is maybe about 6 people. So I think the odds are now very likely that there will be a black woman vice presidential nominee. That's probably the likelihood at this point.
Progressive move forward and on a leftist way, and that's what they have to do very successfully, unfortunately.
Football is supposed to be an escape. It's supposed to not be part of politics and all those things. So we'll have to see what happens this fall and if we can just play ball. Burgess Owens, great to have you on the program tonight.
Thank you, Harris. Thank you. All the best.
Well, that's going to do it for me, filling in for my friend Martha McCallum. This has been The Story, Monday, July 20, 2020. As always, the story will continue.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We were off last week. It's good to be back. One thing we learned while gone is that America's national parks are outstanding. They're tremendous. So most of the time, by the way, is our interstate highway system. We should be proud of all of those things. But in the end, the real reason that we have a government, the only reason really, is so that we can live in peace. You pay your taxes, a lot of taxes, in order to keep your family safe from chaos. That's the bottom line. So you can drive your kids to school without getting carjacked or walk to the supermarket without worrying about being raped. When a violent mob shows up in front of your house and threatens to kill you, you know that you can call the police and they will come to your defense. That's what you pay for. That's what government is for. The rest of it is just extra. For centuries, that has been the deal that we strike with our leaders. Everyone knows it. But suddenly, out of nowhere, they have changed the rules on us. When the mob came for Mark and Patricia McCloskey in St. Louis a few weeks ago, they called the police with that expectation, but the police never came. You're looking at their smashed fence. They had no choice but to defend themselves. The McCloskeys were exercising the most basic right of all, the ancient and immutable right to self-defense.
The MyPillow guy. He regularly used the briefings to lie and discount the dangers of the virus and blame others for his own shortcomings, and he regularly attacked journalists. And in one of the very last briefings, he suggested that people might ingest bleach, almost as a cleaning, to defeat the virus. So it's truly puzzling that the White House believes that more of these briefings will help the president's disastrous response to the coronavirus or the public's perception of them. In any way, especially since things haven't improved much since those bleach comments. Now, today we saw record new coronavirus cases in states like Minnesota, Alaska, Kansas, and Georgia. Georgia, where the Republican governor is suing to prevent Atlanta's mayor from enforcing a mask mandate. American tourists have been banned from entering the Bahamas, even though tourists from other countries are allowed into the Bahamas because Americans are too dangerous to be allowed into other countries. The Canadian government will not allow my hometown team, the Toronto Blue Jays, to play games in their home city because of the risk of carrying the virus from the United States. Things have gotten so bad that the New York Times reports some Republican governors have been, quote, holding late-night phone calls among themselves to trade ideas and grievances. They have sought out partners in the administration other than the president, including Vice President Mike Pence, who, despite echoing Mr. Trump in public, is seen by governors as far more attentive to the continuing disaster. The president got bored with it, David Carney, an advisor to the Texas governor Greg Abbott, said of the pandemic. He got bored with it. The failures of Donald Trump and his handling of the coronavirus have been on full display throughout this pandemic. but we've rarely had him specifically have to answer for them until this weekend when he sat down for an interview with Fox News' Chris Wallace.
Do you regret not wearing a mask in public from the start? And will you consider a national mandate that people need to wear masks?
No, I want people to have a certain freedom, and I don't believe in that, no. Everybody was saying don't wear a mask. All of a sudden, everybody's got to wear a mask. And as you know, masks cause problems, too. With that being said, I'm a believer in masks. I think masks are good.
But, sir, testing is up 37%.
Well, that's good.
I understand. Cases are up 194%. It isn't just that testing has gone up, it's that the virus has spread. The positivity rate has increased.
Many of those cases are young people that would heal in a day. They have the sniffles, and we put it down as a test.
You said at one point,
I think we're going to be very good with the coronavirus. I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope. I'll be right eventually. I will be right eventually. You know, I said it's going to disappear. I'll say it again. But it's going to disappear.
Does that discredit
and I'll be right. I don't think so.
It is going to disappear, and I will be right eventually. That's actually...
He's bored. Well, maybe in an effort to, spice things up a bit, he announced a return to daily coronavirus briefings and made it sound like he's doing it for the ratings.
We had very successful briefings. I was doing them, and we had a lot of people watching, record numbers watching. In the history of cable television, there's never been anything like it.
He's right. No president has ever suggested injecting people with disinfectant, as he did at his last coronavirus briefing. No president has ever used a briefing to hawk so-called miracle drugs that turned out not to be. None has ever boasted about ratings in the middle of a disaster with people dying. But if he's right about anything, he's right about this. People will be watching tomorrow, and hundreds also will be making funeral arrangements. More on all this now from CNN Chief White House correspondent Jim Acosta.
It's a concerted effort to destroy our way of life, to change the fundamental basic social contract, to do away with capitalist democracy and replace it with mob rule, encouraging violence, protecting the criminals and prosecuting people that try to defend themselves against it. It's a bizarro world. It's time for people to wake up and pay attention to it.
Has anyone explained what you were supposed to do in a situation where the police would not respond, they would not come to protect you despite the fact you pay them, and private security wouldn't come either, probably for fear of being sued? What were you supposed to do once people break in and start threatening you?
Well, what various commentators have suggested is we should have just gone inside and filmed them with our cell phones. Well, do you want to have 300 people inside your house breaking stuff, setting fires, and killing you, or would you rather stop them when they're outside? We chose to stop them from coming in.
What's going to happen now? I mean, do you have a fear of going to prison?
I don't know. I have very little familiarity with the criminal process. We've gotten support now from the White House on down, Governor Parsons, the Senator, Eric Schmidt, our Attorney General. It seems like the only person in the United States that thinks we did something wrong is our circuit attorney, but she's the same person that let out of jail everybody that was responsible for the looting and fires and destruction following the George Floyd death in the city of St. Louis. The only people that she wants to prosecute are the people that defended themselves against it, and nobody else, to my knowledge.
So you've been a target of crime. You haven't backed down. You've gone on television repeatedly. People know where you live. And the state has now confiscated your firearms, so you can't protect yourself. On what grounds did they do that? Those were legally registered, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I guess in the technicality of the law is they have to determine whether or not the weapons were readily capable of being, fatal or causing serious bodily harm, and so they have to take them and test them and that sort of thing. And there'll be some revelations that come out about that. But the bottom line is that the police, I've said this before, the police that came out to issue the warrant didn't want to have to do it. They knew that they were just doing their job. They were very polite about it, but nonetheless, you're right. I mean, they present the mob to our door and then strip us of our ability to defend against it.
It's almost unbelievable. I appreciate your coming on tonight.
This is, one of the important sort of ways to potentially navigate our way out of this mess. And I got to say, John,
the vaccine, he's going to be a disaster. The economy will never, flourish when we're still in the grips of the pandemic.
Gabby is a free tool that's saving customers.
Donald does not mean black people any good. He does not care. He's not about the business of correcting what is wrong with the voting rights that's been basically undermined by the Supreme Court in the way that they dealt with Section 4 that really eviscerated Section 5.
Let me ask you about Congressman Lewis was a supporter of Black Lives Matter, but when he would go out there, the thing he would say every time he was in a crowd recently is, you have to vote. Stacey Abrams said the other day, the only way to avoid the idea that Donald Trump is pouring water on the idea of voting by mail or voting in is if the victory is decisive and Donald Trump sees it. But yesterday in the interview with Chris Wallace on Fox, Chris Wallace asked him what happens if he loses. Let's listen to what he said.
In general, not talking about November, are you a good loser?
I'm not a good loser. I don't like to lose. I don't lose too often. I don't like to lose.
But are you gracious?
You don't know until you see. It depends. I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see.
Can you give a direct answer? You will accept the election?
I have to see. Look, I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no. And I didn't last time either.
Congresswoman, that's kind of remarkable. The President of the United States not able to commit to a journalist that he will respect the outcome of the election.
I have said all along that this man is a deplorable human being.
Pull it up and tuck it in. It easily fits into a bag or purse. When it's time to use it, simply unroll it and use it anywhere you need some added comfort or support.
The Go Anywhere pillow is just the right size and I can bring it anywhere with me.
The Go Anywhere pillow makes life a lot more comfortable for me.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen right now to take advantage of a very special offer. When you use the promo code on your screen, Mike will include a second Roll and Go Anywhere pillow absolutely free. And free shipping. That's 2 Roll and Go Anywhere pillows for the price of 1. And you can choose from over 30 exciting colors and patterns.
I guarantee it's going to be the most versatile pillow you'll ever own.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
At times like these, it's important to know
I've thought all along that Americans should be concerned. This is the most flawed character that I've ever encountered in my life. He's dangerous, and I believe him when he says that he cannot tell us whether or not he's going to accept, if he is not elected.
America's choice in home care.
WeatherTech's Cup phone protects your phone from flying or
a single, easy-to-use software. Visit paycom.com and
We're discussing probably a total of 10 different elements, but payroll tax cut's a very important one. All right.
Who may have recently completed a
or desk phone at WeatherTech.com.
Nothing stops you from moving more than lower back pain. Introducing the new...
Well, the first thing we should be doing now is understanding what the president is already doing to the U.S. Postal Service. He has sent his henchmen over to run it, and I'm already getting complaints from people who are saying that they believe that the president of the United States is managing the delivery systems, slowing it down, interfering with people being able to get their mail. And
one more thing before we go tonight. Since this show began almost 4 years ago, I've really tried not to talk about myself on the air or even use the first person pronoun. The last thing this country needs is more narcissism. It's not very interesting anyway. People who use the word I a lot tend to bore everyone but themselves. But tonight we're going to make an exception to that rule. We don't have much choice. Last week, the New York Times began working on a story about where my family and I live. As a matter of journalism, there is no conceivable justification for a story like that. The paper is not alleging we've done anything wrong, and we haven't. We pay our taxes, we like our neighbors, we've never had a dispute with anyone. So why is the New York Times doing a story on the location of my family's house? Well, you know why. To hurt us. to injure my wife and kids so that I will shut up and stop disagreeing with them. They believe in force. We've learned that. 2 years ago, a left-wing journalist publicized our home address in Washington. A group of screaming Antifa lunatics showed up while I was at work. They vandalized our home. They threatened my wife. She called 911 while hiding in a closet. A few weeks later, they showed up again at our house. For the next year, they sent letters to our home threatening to kill us. We tried to ignore it. It felt cowardly to sell our home and leave. We raised our kids there in the neighborhood, and we loved it. But in the end, that's what we did. We have 4 children. It just wasn't worth it. But the New York Times followed us. The paper has assigned a political activist called Murray Carpenter to write a story about where we are now. They've hired a photographer called Tristan Spinsky to take pictures. Their story about where we live is slated to run in the paper this week. Editors there know exactly what will happen to my family when it does run. I called them today and I told them, but they didn't care. They hate my politics. They want this show off the air. If one of my children gets hurt because of a story they wrote, they won't consider it collateral damage. They know it's the whole point of the exercise, to inflict pain on our family, to terrorize us, to control what we say. That's the kind of people they are. They'll deny this, of course. They'll claim it's just journalism, just the facts. Really? So how would Murray Carpenter and his photographer Tristan Spinsky feel if we told you where they live, if we put pictures of their homes on the air? What if we publicized the home address of every one of the soulless robot editors at the New York Times who assigned and managed this incitement to violence against my family? What about the media editor, Jim Windolf? We could do that. We know who they are. Would that qualify as journalism? We doubt they'd consider it journalism. They'd call it criminal behavior if we did it. And that tells you everything. It does tell you everything. That's about it for us tonight. Tomorrow night, we're going to have pretty amazing footage of drones in China. Chinese government loading ethnic minorities into train cars, shipping them off to re-education camps. Remember, as the NFL franchises and woke megacorporations chastise you for your systemic racism and your white fragility, they are completely silent on what is happening in China. In fact, they're benefiting from it. So tune in tomorrow night and every night, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn and totally sincere enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. From New York, the great Sean Hannity. Next.
All right, Tucker, thank you. Great show as always. Welcome to Hannity. Tonight, we got a busy night. Buckle up. We are tracking multiple breaking stories, including bombshell new revelations from the Durham probe. We're getting there. We also bring you the very latest progress in a race for a COVID-19 vaccine. A lot of hope again tonight in the battle against this, quote, invisible enemy. And coming up tonight, we'll have an exclusive interview with the Missouri governor, Mike Parson. He is now vowing to pardon Mark and Patricia McCloskey, yet they were just charged with felonies for a lethal weapon for trying to defend their home when no police were there. And later we'll have the very latest on the barely there, let's say, corrupt Biden's full embrace of, let's see, Bolshevik Bernie's insane socialist agenda and AOC's insane New Green Deal and, oh yeah, confiscate your guns, Beto Bozo, and Pelosi and Schumer and Biden, 125 years of broken promises and failure. If these insane policies are adopted in 106 days, if they win, watch the race to exit the United States. In fact, we are seeing this play out right now in real time in America's cities. Obama, Biden, they did nothing. For 8 years in Obama's hometown of Chicago, they barely mentioned it. You know, wrecked by violence week in and week out, they barely talked about it. We have Pelosi, we have Schumer, we have Biden, 125 years of swamp failure. They've done nothing to quell inner city violent crime anywhere in America, nothing to fix a broken, dilapidated, disgusting, and repulsive educational system. They have failed America's children. We have far-left mayors. They have ruled these cities for decades. They have completely failed their citizens. The only time they shine a light on someone's death, they ignore the 99.9% of deaths. They only talk about it, cherry pick it, if it fits their sick political agenda.
Intelligence community to report publicly and in a timely manner on any efforts by foreign governments that have interfered or tried to interfere with U.S. elections. I will direct my administration to leverage all appropriate instruments of national power and make full use of my executive authority to impose substantial and lasting costs on state perpetrators. These costs could include financial sector sanctions, asset freezes, cyber responses, and the exposure of corruption. A range of other actions could also be taken depending on the nature of the attack. I will direct our response at a time and in a manner of our choosing. He concludes, quote, I have no desire to escalate tensions with Russia or any other country. I would prefer to focus the full energies of my administration on bringing the international community together to fight COVID-19 and the economic pain it has caused, and to tackle other pressing issues of international concern. But if any foreign power recklessly chooses to interfere in our democracy, I will not hesitate to respond as president to impose substantial and lasting costs. Oh, former Vice President Joe Biden tonight throwing down the gauntlet as to how he will respond as president against Russia or any other foreign country.
His relatives don't even know which hospital he was born in.
This is the hottest thing out there. This hat, you can't get him.
As he tested the waters to run for the White House,
People have birth certificates. He doesn't have a birth certificate. If he doesn't, it's one of the greatest scams in the history of politics.
Trump peddled birtherism like a traveling salesman.
He was born in Hawaii. Why are you going through all of this stuff?
Well, a lot of people do not think it was an authentic certificate.
How can you say that if this
report it, Wolf?
It was a political winner.
55% of the Republicans believe in this issue.
He wrote it into the White House. He's got brilliant instincts and brilliant intuitions.
Donald Trump understood exactly how to tap into an ugly racial undercurrent.
The idea of whether he was born in the United States, I think that's a metaphor. Is he one of us? Answer, no.
With the birtherism conspiracy theory, Donald Trump could send a racist message without saying the race part out loud.
Your country was stolen from you by Barack Hussein Obama.
Barack Hussein Obama.
Black African father, Barack Hussein. That's enough.
Trump uses conspiracy theories as weapons against his political opponents.
Very suspicious situation. Obamagate. I'm fighting the deep state.
But there has been no bigger Trump target than Hillary Clinton.
The most corrupt person ever to seek the presidency of the United States.
The darkest Clinton conspiracy theory has a huge following on the internet. Trump and his allies have promoted it, even as it has grown increasingly toxic. This is Edgar Madison Welch. He is driving from his North Carolina home to Washington, D.C., recording a message to his two young daughters. He is preparing to risk his life to save children he doesn't even know.
Like I've always told you, we have a duty to protect people who can't protect themselves. Do for people who can't do for themselves.
You might consider Welch a good man.
I hope you understand that.
But this mission of mercy was actually a dangerous delusion. Welch fell prey to a twisted conspiracy theory called Pizzagate. He actually believed that Hillary Clinton and other Washington elites were running a pedophile ring out of the basement of a pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C.
Just because it's crazy doesn't mean that people won't believe it.
In addition to the AR-15, Welch was carrying a handgun, and a shotgun was found in his car.
He burst into a crowded restaurant. Terrified customers ran for their lives, but there were no abused children, not even a basement. No one was hurt. Welch went to prison. The original source of all this? A leaked email to John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chief, It was from his brother, and it said simply, "Would love to get a pizza."
Pizza is a well-known pedophile code word that actually has been used by law enforcement to arrest online sexual predators of children. Pizzagate is real.
Now, disturbingly, teenagers have grown obsessed with Pizzagate. They believe celebrities have joined Hillary Clinton to abuse children.
You need to search for what they don't want us paying attention to.
Child trafficking.
The social media site TikTok, popular with teenagers, has logged more than 80 million views for posts with the Pizzagate hashtag, according to the New York Times.
We are Q.
Pizzagate began in 2016, but in the last few years, it has grown into an even bigger conspiracy theory called QAnon.
When nonsense becomes actually dangerous is when people believe it to be true.
A mysterious character or characters called Q, supposedly high up in US intelligence, give followers hints about deep state conspirators who are out to destroy Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is the hero of the QAnon following. He's actually like a Christ-like figure who will save the country and save the world.
Save the world from the deep state, from liberals, from pedophiles.
Do you believe there's a ring of high-profile politicians who are kidnapping and sacrificing children?
I do believe that.
But everything he posts about child pedophilia and what's been going on in our country and who's doing it is coming to light.
Trump is part of the Q team. From what we understand, Q Plus is his handle, and he does a lot of posts, and he's part of this.
Crowds of QAnon believers show up at Trump rallies.
Hi, my name is Tammy, and I'm a family doctor. Truth. Q is about getting to the truth by educating people about the truth, about what's really going on.
They're anonymous, but they're all on the same track looking for the truth.
All QAnon, all nuts.
Getting to the truth is a QAnon theme, even though its beliefs are preposterous fiction.
The motorcade moves into the downtown area. Death is 6 minutes away.
The biggest conspiracy theory of them all, who really killed JFK, has now become part of QAnon.
JFK Jr. is alive. God, right? JFK Jr. is in protected custody because they tried to kill him, just like they killed his father.
My father stood before you.
The belief is that somehow the late JFK Jr. is alive and helping Trump clean up the deep state.
They're not tethered to the truth, so it's very easy to make up more and more elaborate stories.
QAnon has morphed from conspiracy theory,
some call it the Great Awakening,
into an actual political movement of sorts.
We've all been gathering online and talking together as Americans and uniting and...
You think it's maybe just to make you comfortable talking with other frustrated, sometimes angry people?
Yes.
What is Donald Trump's connection to QAnon? Meet radio host Michael LeBron. He is one of QAnon's chief pushers.
If you have not even ventured initially into the QAnon phenomenon, do you have any idea of what you're missing?
This is QAnon pusher Michael LeBron in the Oval Office with the president.
Eric Trump, everybody!
Eric Trump, the president's son, posted this Instagram. He's promoting QAnon, even using one of the slogans. Where we go one, we go all.
You're wearing a shirt that says QWWG 1WGA. What does that mean?
It means where we go one, we go all.
Where we go one, we go all.
Where we go one, we go all.
General Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, whom Trump has lavishly praised as a fine man wronged by the justice system, took the QAnon oath on the 4th of July with family and friends.
God bless America.
God bless America.
Flynn's lawyers tell CNN that the oath he took was not connected to QAnon.
Where we go one.
But in fact, that oath is universally recognized inside the Q movement.
Where we go one.
We go all.
Where we go one, we go all.
President Donald Trump frequently retweets QAnon accounts. On the 4th of July, the same day Michael Flynn took his oath, while the coronavirus was surging to record levels all over the country, the president retweeted QAnon accounts 14 times. No one is sure how many people are in the group, but according to the Washington Post, about 600,000 people have voted for QAnon-connected political candidates. Media Matters has documented at least 46 of them are in the current election cycle.
I'm Marjorie Green, and I approve this ad.
Marjorie Green faces an August runoff in her effort to win a congressional seat from Northwest Georgia.
Q has put out there that many high-level officials will soon be arrested. Is it going to be true that the child pedophilia and the elites in the Washington, D.C., is that what we're really going to see come out? Is it going to be satanic worship? Save America.
Marjorie Green is favored to win that seat in the House of Representatives. Perhaps the biggest question surrounding all of this is why? Why would anyone believe any of these conspiracy theories?
It's so unsettling and I think quite authentically terrifying to live in a world that we feel we can't control.
Conspiracism becomes very, very seductive, very, very attractive, because it explains that the world is arrayed against you, and this is the important part, it's not your fault.
Not my fault, I inherited this mess, but we're fixing it. Hey, it's not my fault. I didn't put us there. No, I don't take responsibility at all.
It externalizes blame. That's what QAnon does for people.
And it seems to give its followers a kind of emotional support.
It creates an explanation that comforts and consoles, and there's always this unnamed, unseen, deep state that is actually responsible for everything.
QAnon provides people with the psychological comfort they need. What it does for Donald Trump is that it provides the fear that keeps his base motivated.
Several studies done by scientists from the United Kingdom and Poland found that conspiracy-minded people have a strong need to feel better or smarter than others. They are, in other words, narcissistic. If that sounds familiar.
I don't think this is the most controversial thing in the world to state that he is, even by the standards of American politicians, unusually narcissistic.
I alone can fix it. People would say I'm the super genius of all time. The one that matters is me.
Is it possible that Trump just uses conspiracy theories to gin up his base? Maybe, but
he has a conspiracist mindset. He gravitates instinctively, naturally, inescapably to conspiratorial understandings of the world.
There's something going on that we don't know about. A lot of people are saying they had spies in my campaign. It could be a plot. I mean, I don't want to think in terms of conspiracy, but it could be a plot.
Trump's conspiracy theories resonate deeply with his voters, and that raises the most troubling aspect of this story.
Our immune system has been weakened to conspiracy thinking.
This is why it's so dangerous.
Many Americans are vulnerable to conspiracy theories because they don't trust government, officials, or institutions. Listen to what this QAnon follower says.
We can all admit that pretty much everybody knows the government is corrupt. Q, to me, is just showing that it's a lot more corrupt than we thought.
Pew Research shows America's trust has been dropping for decades. Just look at the last 20 years. By the time Donald Trump was elected president, belief and faith in democracy had reached an all-time low. Trust in the media took a similar plunge, and Donald Trump knows it.
Just remember, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
What's important is to get them to disbelieve everything.
This is the way in which hard demagoguery can destroy democracy.
All of this as we face a presidential election.
Voter fraud, voter fraud.
The most corrupt election in the history of our country.
It's a lie.
Coming up next, the biggest conspiracy threat of all.
The sort of thing I never imagined would be possible in the United States of America.
What? You, the American people, are the only thing standing in the way. 106 days, America, the world is on the brink. Here now, House press secretaries, Fox News contributors, Ari Fleischer, Sarah Sanders. All right, Ari, let's start where I am saying that this race has fundamentally changed based on Biden's comments about the police now become the enemy, reallocating funds. To me, that's defund. He's now adopted Bernie, AOC, Bozo, and 125 years of failure of Biden, Pelosi, Schumer. Am I wrong?
Yes. In a traditional campaign, Sean, you're 100% right. Those vulnerabilities that Joe Biden has would normally be dogging him and weighing him down. What's different this year, I submit to you, Sean, is COVID. So much of what the president's message that he wants to get through is not penetrating. It's not making it a race about Biden, but so far it is still a referendum on how President Trump is handling COVID. Until he gets a handle on COVID, it's going to be very hard for him to define Joe Biden. Sorry to say it, but that's my view.
Let me go. The president tweeted out today. Everyone's telling me masks are patriotic. So the president, the CDC just last week, Sarah, said, hey, you know what? Because, by the way, let's backtrack. Everybody got everything wrong. The models are wrong. I happen to be a fan of Dr. Fauci, have deep respect for him. It wasn't his fault. China lied to the world. But people were saying in late March, masks don't work, don't use masks. Okay, I think they were wrong. I've been encouraging people because I selfishly want to go to baseball games, but more importantly, I don't want, if I get the virus, to get mom and grandma and grandpa and dad sick. That's my own personal choice. I don't think you mandate it. I think we highly encourage that, and the president did that today.
Absolutely, and I think he was right to encourage people to take personal responsibility, and we should encourage people to keep doing that. There's nothing wrong with wearing a mask, and I think you're exactly right. Let's protect those that are vulnerable around us. If we have the ability to do that, let's do it. At the same time, we don't need government dictating every single move we make. Right now, we are looking at, I think, one of the clearest contrasts coming up in 2020. Do we want government running every single part of our life, or do we want them allowing us to be what makes America great, and that's having freedom and prosperity? I think one of the things that the president is doing right now is making very clear that he is a president of law and order. What is taking place in these Democrat-run cities is absolutely tragic and shouldn't go on. And I'm glad that we have a president that's willing to stand up to the liberal mob and do his job. One of the #1 priority of the government and particularly of the president is to keep Americans safe. He's the only one that's talking about how he's going to do that and actually taking action to do it. And I think he's smart to do that, but I also think we need to continue to encourage people to take personal responsibility and do our very best to protect those that are vulnerable around us.
Let's put up the president's tweet. People are going to look at it. This answers Ari's question. You know, we are the United States. In an effort to defeat the invisible China virus, many people say it's patriotic to wear a face mask. When you can't socially distance, there's nobody more patriotic than your favorite president. The president tweets out a picture of the mask. He wore the mask. By the way, the two people in the country that don't need to worry about wearing a mask are the president and Joe Biden, because you can't get around either of them unless you test it. Putting that aside. Now I want to ask you about the issue of law and order and safety and security. Ari, this is the ad that was put out by the campaign of the president earlier today.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Crime will rise significantly.
I'm Donald J. Trump.
Now the police have become the enemy when they're supposed to protect the people. And are you in favor of reallocating these funds? Yes, I am. That sounds like defund to me is Ari Fleischer. I don't feel safe in Joe Biden's America, if that's his plan.
No question Joe Biden has boarded the train to redirect funds away from the police department and put it into other activities, including housing. Ask any police department where those cuts will come from. They'll come from the number of police on the street. Now, this is the same Joe Biden who has walked away from his support of the crime bill. And if you remember, one of the greatest bragging points of the Biden administration under President Clinton was they put 100,000 cops on the street. Now he wants to take cops off the street.
He said people were predators. He also said in the battle over integration of schools, I don't want my kids in a racial jungle. His words.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why he's got a weakness, particularly among younger African Americans, that Donald Trump is going to do better with. But the bigger point here is there's a huge vulnerability for Joe Biden on public safety. And who's the greatest people who benefit from public safety? This is the president's huge opportunity in Chicago. It's the black community. It's poor people. It's people whose neighborhoods have been neglected. Who can do the most to protect their lives? That's what I would love to see.
Should he go in and help?
I know the answer. It's not Joe Biden.
Should he bail out Chicago and Portland and Seattle and New York City when they won't protect innocent people?
Well, the issue of protecting federal facilities like a courthouse when a city won't do it,
What
absolutely.
about the city? What about
the issue
where
of going
the
into
murders
neighborhoods
are
in Chicago? Yeah, the issue of going into the neighborhoods is very different because what authority does the federal government have there, and especially if the city won't support it? I think what you do is you embarrass the mayors, you embarrass the councilmen, and you say, why aren't you protecting your own people? People, turn to us, turn to me. We will protect you. That's what Donald Trump should be doing.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to give you both 20 seconds each. What would you advise the president tonight, 106 days out?
Well, I think Ari's exactly right. He needs to lean in and be the president that can keep Americans safe. As a mom of 3 young children, I don't want my kids growing up in Joe Biden's America where there's no one to call when they need help. And under President Trump, I think every parent can go to sleep at night knowing that the president of the United States is doing literally everything he can to keep them safe. That is his #1 duty, #1 obligation. He should be reminding people of that, but do it in a way that's compassionate. Talk about how he cares about the people and remind them of that being the core of who he is. And one of the things that he ran on in 2016 and helped him get elected.
Final 20 seconds, Ari Fleischer. Advice.
For the president, that as much as you want to talk about the economy and public safety, people won't be as open to listening to it until and unless you deal with COVID first. And that means in the next 2 to 3 weeks, go out to all the places in America that you are sending federal resources to help the hot spots. Next time nurses and doctors get sent in, go see them off. When the trucks are rolling with the medicines that the federal government's providing, see off those trucks, give a speech. Put the president in the heart and center of the federal government's response. Once people see he's taking care of COVID, his message is going to then be much better heard.
All right, Ari, Sarah, good to see you both. Thank you. When we come back, Lindsey Graham, live breaking news on who is calling from the deep state to testify. He is calling somebody big soon. And you don't want to miss, by the way, breaking tonight, felony charges filed against the McCloskeys, that couple right there, guarding their home. The Missouri governor says he will pardon them. He joins us with an exclusive interview next.
Dust mite droppings? Dead skin cells?
They poop show. They use a different word.
It ended in disgrace.
In that commission's report, when you get to the section marked voter fraud, the pages are blank.
But the voter fraud lie lives on.
We're not going to lose. The only way we can lose is if cheating goes on.
Voter fraud conspiracy theories have been around long before Donald Trump.
Vote fraud threatens the very integrity of our process.
In the 2000s, some Republicans began spinning tales of widespread voter fraud.
There are many ways to jimmy the system.
There was growing concern in the party about the nation's demographics.
This is your victory.
That more people of color who traditionally voted Democrat were going to the polls.
Certain Republican elites came to believe that the Republican Party had an interest in depressing turnout. And that's when they invented the fiction of voter fraud.
Requiring people to show photo ID in order to vote.
Some in the party used the myth of rampant voter fraud,
pushing more voters out of the ballot box,
to justify new voting restrictions.
I just think it's terrible because there's so many people that don't have ID and they're not going to be able to vote.
That made it harder for black Americans to vote.
We're ready to march on ballot box.
a shameful echo of the Jim Crow South.
We're taking a very close look at Wisconsin right now.
In 2016, these measures had a real impact.
Donald Trump continues to maintain his lead of about 90,000 votes.
Tens of thousands of people were deterred from voting in Wisconsin because of that state's ID law.
The question then is, are there other Democratic votes out there somewhere? It's just not enough.
And black voter turnout plummeted.
CNN now projects that Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin.
Trump won the state by less than 23,000 ballots.
Voter fraud doesn't change an election result. Voter suppression does.
Millions and millions of ballots.
Trump's doubling down on his ballot box conspiracy theories in 2020.
Will they be counterfeited by groups inside our nation?
From rigged mail-in ballots?
Will they be counterfeited by the millions by foreign powers?
To votes being air-mailed from China. There's growing fear that Trump's disinformation campaign will cast doubt on the outcome of the election. Democrats and Republicans are gaming out worst-case scenarios.
This president's going to try to steal this election.
This will be, in my opinion, the most corrupt election in the history of our country.
Donald Trump may be saving his most dangerous conspiracy theory for last.
I think of all the conspiracies, this one is one I worry about the most.
As a caricature artist, I appreciate what makes each person unique. That's why I like Liberty Mutual. They get that no two people are alike. And customize your car insurance so you only pay for what you need. Almost done? What do you think?
I don't see it. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Jade is about to... Oh, and with a verified approval from Rocket Mortgage, she has the...
Posing for the picture app.
Take a look.
Well, I think the American people expect indictments. I know